Are you all out there? I don't know it. I'm here sitting in an empty zendo. Even if there were students, it should be empty. Nobody moving. Everyone in the present moment. But I know differently. I've sat too much. So here we are in a very odd situation, wouldn't you say? And Roshi Joan, probably 9 months or a year ago, had a wonderful idea of scheduling poets like raisins in a coffee cake, spread out every once in a while, that will give a Dharma talk and talk about their poetry. And it would be people in Santa Fe, poets in Santa Fe. So I was the first one. And I was very touched because I started out as a poet. I mostly write prose now, but I would love to talk about my poetry journey. And I'm hoping that it will also help you. I'm not doing some abstract poetry that, won't help right now. But I'm going to begin by telling you that when I was young and I was in the 60s in high school, and I was madly in love with literature, but it never dawned on me to write because most of the people who wrote that we read were male, old, usually from England. So it had nothing to do with my experience. The other thing was, I used to read in high school and also in college and think, how did they do that? How did they, if you don't know how to write, you can't imagine the acres of distance between you and the page. How did they think of writing that? And where did it come from? I felt that way. But then in the early 70s, feminism, and late 60s, feminism was blooming. And there was one line that was very important for me. Have a confidence in your experience that it's rich enough to write about. So suddenly, my experience could be rich enough. Opening the refrigerator, cutting a lemon is rich enough to write about. It never dawned on me before. And then one day, I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working. 4 of us ran a restaurant called Naked Lunch. Some of you have heard of it. And, from William Burroughs. And it was a nonprofit restaurant. And we only made lunches. And I walked home, and I stopped in Senecor bookstore, and there was a thin volume. It was the first time I looked at modern poetry. I was still soaked in English literature. And there was a thin volume called Fruits and Vegetables. Well, that's what I was doing all day, is cutting up fruits and vegetables. I pulled it out. It was by Erica Jong, who wrote Fear of Flying, but she was a poet to begin with. And the first poem I opened to was about sautéing an onion. You could write about that. I shut the book. I put it back in its place, which kills me now. It was only $3. Why didn't I buy it? But I put it back. I didn't have any money. And a little neuron connected, and I said, okay, I'm going home and writing. And I'm starting to write about my family because no one can tell me I'm wrong because I know them better than anybody else. I was used to getting A's or B's and trying to get the attention of my teacher. But suddenly it was going to come from me. And I went home and I started to write. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I started writing and writing and writing. And then one day, in an afternoon, in a notebook, a cheap notebook, I wrote what I knew was my first poem. And I knew it because it came out of me, and I said things I never thought of saying before. And you know what it was about? An Ebinger's chocolate cake. Ebinger's was this great bakery in Brooklyn. And anybody from Brooklyn, if I mention Ebinger's, gets excited. And it was a blackout cake. And I knew it was a poem. I just knew it. I felt it from inside. And I didn't care about whether anyone else thought it was good or not, because it felt so good. And that's really where we have to come from as writers, as meditators. Not, meditating is very hard, and sometimes it feels terrible, but it's your terrible. It's coming from you. It's your relationship with yourself. And then, of course, with all sentient beings. But that takes a little bit of a while. So I was writing, and then I started sitting Zen. And one day in Zen, and I moved to Minnesota, and one day with Katagiri Roshi, he knew I was in love with writing. And we sat like crazy people. We called ourselves the spiritual kamikazes. We were there at 4:30 every morning. We'd go to work at 7:30. We'd come back at night. We sat a sesshin every month. It was just crazy. Now when I look back, it was like the Japanese military. Luckily, I was in my mid-20s and 30s, so I could do it. But anyway, one day, he said to me, "Why don't you make writing your practice?" And I was taken aback, and I said, "You don't want me here anymore?" He said, "No, but you love to write." I said, "But no, I have to meditate. My head is crazy." He said, "It's pretty good to meditate, but you should also write. Make it your practice." And so what I did, because I really was still trying to figure out writing, and I knew I couldn't learn it in school, because I never learned it in all the years I'd been in school. I just knew that there was a great distance, and I wanted to close that distance. And I thought, okay, so this is where it will really help you, I think, even in the coming months with what's happening to all of us, and we're being cloistered. So, in zazen, you have a very strict form. You sit cross-legged if you can, and, back straight, shoulders down, and you sit, and the bell rings, and for 40 minutes, we used to sit for 40 minutes, you just sat, you didn't budge. Now, of course, you looked like you were just meditating and peaceful, but we all know better than that. Inside, there was tremendous turmoil, especially at the beginning. I didn't know what to do with my mind. I didn't even know I had a mind, and that I didn't know that it moved all around like a cloud. You could not get any control of it. You couldn't grab it. You couldn't contain it. And it just kept going. And so what I did was I started studying it. I started studying the mind. I watched it, how I would be like so angry, and it would go on, and then in a moment, it would go away for a little bit. And then I'd grab it and pull it back. Or I'd tell a story, because my knees hurt so much, I couldn't stay still anymore. So I'd make up a fantasy, and then I'd come back. And then once in a while, I remember this very clearly, I'd think, Natalie, why don't you try being present? That's what they keep talking about. Why don't you just try to be with the breath and be here? So I said, okay, and I took a breath in and a breath out, and I was suddenly here, and it was so frightening at first to be present that I zoomed out again with some fantasy or something to grab it. But all the time, I was studying the mind and how the mind moves. So I translated this into writing practice. It wasn't called writing practice at the time. You're hearing it at the end when it's all matured. But I started to say, just like 40 minutes for writing, I'd say 10 minutes. You have to keep your hand going, no matter what comes up. Just like in sitting, tremendous sexual feelings, anger, rage, you sit still and you eat it. So with writing, go for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, keep your hand moving, no matter what comes up. Even if it's totally boring, you just keep going. And I started to trust the mind and have a relationship with that mind. And that really is what a writer needs to do. Because really, what is the equipment of a writer? Pen, paper, and the human mind. Pen and paper isn't so hard. It's the human mind that's hard. Just like sitting, it's a little hard with your knees and your shoulders, but the mind is what's really hard. So in writing, I translated that structure and I started to write. And what I saw was go for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half hour. And I also did it, if you notice, the Japanese love to, you sit with people. You don't usually sit alone. When I first started in Taos, I made a chicken coop into my meditation place. And then I sat in somebody's fruit cellar. Actually, it was Maggie Kress, his fruit cellar. I don't know if anyone out there knows her. She used to study with Suzuki Roshi. So she gave me her fruit cellar. But then when I was with Japanese Zen and Katagiri Roshi, we all sat together. And I became very dependent on sitting together. I wanted to be with other people because it held me up. So then with writing, I didn't want to sit alone and do writing practice. So I went to cafes. And I also got other people to write with me. Go 10 minutes, and we'd all write. And so that structure of Zen in the Zendo, I brought over into the cafe, into my living room, into the library, just to have people around. So you feel like you're not just isolated, that you're talking to someone. So I would do writing practice, and I learned about structure through it, about how to structure the mind. And so what would happen is I'd write 10 minutes, and then once in a while it would break through. And when it broke through, I was really present. Just like sometimes in sitting, suddenly you're really present. You don't know how you got there, maybe from your breath, or it just opens. Well, in writing practice, suddenly I was writing about soup, but suddenly it wasn't me writing about soup. Soup was writing about soup. Writing did writing. I got out of the way. Even if I used my personal details, it was clear. It ran clear. I wasn't in the way. So after I'd fill a notebook, I would reread the whole notebook. I'd go to a cafe and just read. And sometimes I was so boring. And sometimes I complained so much, and the complaining was so boring that after a while I stopped complaining when I wrote. Or if I started, I would put dash. What I really want to say is, and I dropped to a deeper level. But I began to study my mind also in the notebook. And when I read through the notebook, I would find poems. I called them poems because they were present. And I didn't edit them, I just accepted them. I received them and put them on paper and typed them up like a poem. And if you were on for 10 minutes, it was a full-page poem. And so I was very strict. I didn't edit because what I really wanted was a relationship with my mind. I didn't want to afterwards mess around with it. I was telling my mind, go for it. Do whatever you need to. And I was encouraging it to come forward and speak. And I'm not going to edit you. And I'm going to accept what you have to say and where you go. So eventually, I had a book come out called Chicken and in Love in 1980. And it was by Holy Cow Press, was the press. And it was $3. I think this was the second edition. The first edition was $2. And, nobody bought poetry. It's better now. People are into poetry much more now. But at that time, there were a lot of poets in Minnesota, but people didn't buy poetry books. So I'd make chocolate chip cookies and invite friends over, and I'd serve them chocolate chip cookies, and I'd read them poems, and I'd have a pile that they could buy. Rarely did anybody buy any. They're probably sorry now because it's out of print, and I heard that it sells for a lot of money. So I'm going to take the chance of reading you a poem from very long ago. And I thought we should have some visuals. I don't know, can you see over here? We have an orange bowl. I also brought some daffodils, which I'm going to ask Noah after this is over to give to Roshi Joan from our backyard. It's spring here and probably where you are. Spring in New Mexico, there's not much going on yet in March. But I noticed when I walked here, there were forsythias budding on the Zen land here. So I'm going to read this poem to you that came out straight. And it's about this orange bowl. This is a long time ago. A very long time ago that I wrote this. Orange bowl. Grandpa had an orange bowl that I never noticed. Sure, of course I noticed it. I knew it was Grandpa's, but I never saw it, the way you never see things that are there every day, speaking to you, but you never notice them, except to water them or put them away or clean them. So then afterwards, you try so hard to remember them, to let them comfort you and remind you about the nice life you had. Yeah, and I guess it was nice when Grandpa was around. He taught me stuff like cleaning the crumbs off the table and always wearing shoes so I wouldn't step on needles, and to soak all the silverware in the dirty pot when I washed dishes to save soap. I was short then, and the screen windows were always open because it was summer, and there was that summer smell that never really smelled, but you seemed to take it in through your nose anyway. And among the things I washed and dripped with water was this shiny orange bowl, the color of a Florida orange after it's been dyed orange. I feel it now, wet and clean, surrounded by the air that was summer. He ate cornflakes in it every morning, and the flakes got soggy and stuck to the sides of the bowl. And sometimes I would pick them with my fingers and eat them. It was fun being short, because then Grandpa could put his arm around my waist when I stood and he sat and ate his cornflakes. That isn't really the reason it was fun being short. There is no real reason. It was just good to be there, that summer with the screened windows and the orange bowl, and be short and hungry and have cornflakes. I don't know. Maybe Grandpa didn't even matter. He died anyway. He just helped to set the scene. Having an orange bowl and being taller, so I knew I was shorter, and marrying Grandma, so eventually I could wash dishes with him sometime in my life and remember it some other time in my life. It was fun, though I didn't know it then. In the same way, I never really saw the orange bowl. Instead, I was listening to the bells of the Good Humor Man and scratching mosquitoes on my legs with the heel of my sneaker while I stood by the sink. You might think I washed dishes a lot when I was young. I didn't. Grandpa didn't like the way I did them. But somehow I'm remembering this one time when I did, and when I was short, and when Grandpa was alive. Wow. I haven't read that in probably 40 years. I think that's something about what we should be noticing now, that we're home and things have slowed down, or we're under tremendous stress and we think it's terrible. We're still alive, and there are just moments that matter, that just can open up. And maybe we can find them. And the other thing we can find is structure. You know, you might be completely stressed out, have your kids at home, have to work at home. Well, for sure you have to make a structure for your kids or you'll go out of your mind. But structure, maybe even 10 minutes for yourself. Just 10 minutes. Sit on a rock outside. Or stop in the middle of all the craziness and just sit for 10 minutes. Not even meditation. Just stare out the window. But see if you can structure something. Just some little thing. Structure is so important. I'll read you another one that, these are really old poems. Really what I'm doing is exposing myself. I mostly don't talk about this very much. But this was really the beginning backbone of my writing practice and of my Zen practice. They came together. There's no difference for me. And often I'll do writing practice and then I'll sit because it's cleared my mind of all my monkey mind. So when I sit, I can drop deeper and clearer much faster. Because, you know, otherwise, I spent 12 years with Katagiri, maybe with the same thought for 12 years. I could have gotten rid of it with writing practice and then sat down. It was painful. Okay, this is straight out of Zen, I'm sure. Be tree, let ice bend you, lend you, sun warm you, be in air elegant, turn with the land, be tree, standing through years, chipmunks, gulls, torn open by fox, lichen crawl over rocks, be tree, be mover in space, be silent grower, be all of me against late cold winter, beside barn, near road, close to porch, be bent, be strong, sing wind, sink deep, be tree. And this all came straight out of the notebook. Maybe Katagiri, he would often say about, do the trees whine when it's 40 below? Well, no, so stop whining. We would use the example of the trees. So this is Chicken and in Love. And I was in love. I was really in love. Well, I was married then, so there's a lot of love poems in here. But I was in love with poetry, mad for it. And then I wrote I won a fellowship. I could never, and this is important, I could never get anything published. I got this book published, but I could never get individual things published. And then I would apply for all these fellowships just because everybody else was doing it. And suddenly I won a really big fellowship because the poets who were judging it were not from Minnesota, because I didn't write about Minnesota a lot. And so I won this big fellowship, and I wrote another manuscript. And I couldn't get it published. I spent 1.5 years, and I couldn't get it published. So I was sitting at the Croissant Cafe with my friend Kate Green. I said, what should I do now? I want to be in the world. You know, one of the things that I honor about people who have a lifetime of poetry, you'll never make money at it. You know, it's just not a hot commodity. And so it's wonderful. These people, it's their religion, their practice, their walk in life. But I wanted to be in the world and heard. And so Kate Green said to me, 6 years ago, that book you were going to write, it was Writing Down the Bones. I didn't have that title then. Why don't you try writing it again? I said, okay. And I got in my car, and I turned at Hennepin and Lake, and suddenly I thought of the structure. I'm coming back to structure. I'd been practicing by then, I think 6 years, and I was writing poetry. If you look at poems, a poetry book, you can open to any poem and get a hit. So that's how I structured Writing Down the Bones. Also, I'd been reading over and over again Suzuki Roshi, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. His talks, you can open to any one and read it. It doesn't have to be chronological. And so it was very organic to my life of being soaked in Zen, soaked in poetry, and that was the part that was hard. I couldn't figure out a structure to pour out what I had to say. And so 6 years ago, when I tried to write about how to write, I went back to my 4th grade teacher and thought I had to have an outline and chapters, and I was so bored that I started doing catering, and I catered weddings. But then 6 years, I had this structure, and so I could pour myself into it. Structure is everything. It really gets you out of bed. Why get up in the morning? Brush your teeth. So I wrote this other manuscript, Top of My Lungs. And I really want to get this across, and I want to check what time. Oh, okay, we have a little time, yeah. Is that you please trust yourself in Zen and in writing, but in anything, in baking a cake. Maybe you bake a lousy cake one time, but you trusted yourself and you made it, and then you learn from it. Because it really has to come from the inside. Katagiri Roshi would be at the Zendo every morning at 5 a.m. There was no traveling or anything in those days. He was there every day. And I would come and I'd say, this is awfully early. He said, I'm here not for Minnesota Zen Center or for you. I'm here for all sentient beings, every day, forever. And it was really hard for me to get up. And sometimes I'd get up and come, and I expect to be, bravo, Natalie. There was nothing. And then when I didn't come, there was nothing. And it took maybe 3 years for me to wake it up inside to come every morning at 5 a.m. because I wanted to come. I didn't even want to. It was deeper than wanting. Because then you get lost in wanting, not wanting, fighting. He used to call it fighting tofu. It's ridiculous. But it came from a deeper place. If you keep practicing, it will come from that place. And I also want to say, if you can't join Upaya or whatever group is zooming around to sit zazen, one of the best things to do is to sit outside. Now, I know some of you can't. I spoke to two of my students in Paris. They can't go out. Then open a window and sit by the window and feel the breeze, feel the outside air. Because when you sit outside, you really are sitting with all sentient beings. It's just there in the air outside. And that really helps. So I wrote Writing Down the Bones, and I took off, and I wrote one prose book after another. But my manuscript, Top of My Lungs, was just sitting there. And then my old Dharma friend, in 2000, I went back to Minnesota to live and practice. Scott Edelstein said, "Send me that manuscript. Let me see if I could get it published." And so I sent it to him, and he got it published with some of my paintings. It's called Top of My Lungs. And it was wonderful and odd, because by 2000, I'd written many prose books and didn't feel at all like a poet. But I went on a little book tour and made believe I was a poet again. So I'll read you a few poems from this. Oh, this is another structure. I thought, okay, Nat, let's put, it was summer. Do you remember there was one year, it's probably happened a lot now, but in the late 90s, Texas was just shooting up 100 degrees. Now I hear for 6 weeks at a time, it's 100 degrees. But back in the late 90s, it was a phenomena that it was 100 degrees for a few days in Texas. And so I thought, I think I'll try to write a poem that has cokes and chickens. I didn't know what I meant by that. And I thought, just let the hand going. So I started writing. I must have given myself about an hour. Coke and chickens in the heat in Texas. Go, Natalie. And I just kept going and tossing them back and forth. So here's a poem. It's really a prose poem. You see how it's set up? Okay, Coke and chickens. 2 million Coke bottles did not die in the heat wave that struck Texas like an old chicken thrown against a barn. Kids in red pickups winding down dusty roads in Texas this summer looked for Coke and avoided chickens. The old people, whose blood boiled when the heat hit 110, didn't want any poultry. Even the chickens didn't want Coke when they croaked. The price of chicken has gone up this summer like the heat in Texas, from 69 cents a pound to 89. Coke has always been overpriced. It didn't rise with the heat. Get a chicken near a hot lake in Texas during the heat wave and you've got soup. When a Coke's empty, you still have the bottle. When a chicken is dead, you have bones. Put the bones in the bottle and you have a sculpture. Put a chicken next to a bottle of Coke in a heat wave, and I bet you $10 the chicken will move first. It wasn't so good for Texas this summer. A hurricane in the south and chickens collapsing in the north like empty Coke crates. Capons, fryers, roasters, all out like hot lights, not one of them the color of Coke. Cokes today were like chickens, stiff, silent, cold, one never having lived, the other having one life to give. The memorial was simple: American flags, Texans eating ham, Cokes in their hands, surveying chickens scattered across the land. This feels very silly, but I remember I had fun writing it. I'll read you some. Oh, here's one that I've been meaning to read when we do the haiku weekends in February. So it went along with this painting. I don't know if you can see close up of a piano. This was my old husband's piano. Okay, I'll read you the haiku. It's called American Haiku. Grape nuts and milk, I poured each out of their own container and ate them together. American Haiku. Grape nuts and milk, I poured each out of their own container and ate them together. And do you want me to give you one serious haiku? Not haiku, poem? Let's see. Oh, so I won this fellowship and I went to Israel. Partially I went to Israel because Katagiri. I went to him once during a session and I said, you know, the more I'm sitting, the more Jewish I feel. And he said, well, that makes sense. The more you sit, the more you become who you are. He said, leave the Zendo for 6 months. He was always telling me to leave the Zendo for 6 months and go study in the synagogues and with the rabbis. So I took him at his word, and the fellowship sent me to Israel if I wanted to go. And I went to Israel trying to find the core of Judaism, because he said, when you go deep enough in Judaism, you'll find Zen. And I wanted to be with Zen, so I went to Israel. And I wrote some poems there. And what was interesting about it is that I wrote not as a Jew in America. Suddenly everybody was Jewish. Even the car mechanics, everybody. And a different kind of poetry came out of me. So I'm going to read you a little. This is called Holy Land. And this is with an abstract painting. Whoops. I don't know if you can get that. Noah. Okay. Holy Land. I want the earth to last. I want it to last beyond Saturday night and the onion soup, out beyond walks in the hills, among wild poppies and black dogs, past Crusader castles and the Jordan River, past Arab guns and Jewish stubbornness, through rivers and eucalyptus trees and white horses standing in tall yellow clover. I want the earth to last. And then I'll read you one. Wait, what time is it? Oh, we're almost ending. Okay. I'll read you this one about when I left Minnesota. Don't forget, when I wrote these, again, I found them in my notebook later and pulled them out. I was really doing a practice. The most important thing to me was to write down first thoughts, the ones where I was out of the way. I'm trying to tell something about empty farm fields, broken by fall, and the half-light of sun. Cafes in towns with only a gas station, church and bar. I'm trying to say something about loneliness, about the crack of pale yellow corn stalks in the middle of September in Minnesota. I was so much a foreigner in Minnesota, and so was Katagiri Roshi. When I moved there in 1978, there was one Italian restaurant in Minneapolis, nothing Japanese. He used to say when he'd walk across the street, everybody would turn and look at him. It was a very different place than it is now. Okay, I'm going to end with this, which I think is the last poem in the book. And I don't think you can see this painting. It's an old oak, the oak and the owl. I don't know if it shows up. Oh, okay, good. Noah just gave me the thumbs up. Into this world. Let us die gracefully into this world, like a leaf pressed in stone. Let us go quietly, breathing our last breath. Let the sun continue to revolve in its great golden dance. Let us leave it be as it is and not hold on, not even to the moon, tipped as it will be tonight and beckoning wildly in the sea. So I hope I helped a little in some way. Oh, I know what I can tell you. Now my structure that I created, because I have all day, because I just started to retire, I write one letter a day, that I put a stamp on and an envelope that I lick, one letter a day to someone every day, and I have to write it outside, either in a park or the top of a mountain. We're still able to hike here. I don't know when they'll close that, but I'm going to take advantage of it. Boiled the water, boiled the cup in the water. Thank you. It was scary to come here. I'm very cloistered or outside. I send everyone my love.